I assisted my stepson and his girlfriend during their initial experience. A genuine tale of infidelity. The key turned in the lock with a gentle click, and I pushed the door open, stepping into the cool, softly illuminated apartment. The grocery bags weighed heavily in my hands, the plastic handles pressing into my palms, yet I hardly registered the discomfort. I left work early, unable to concentrate, my thoughts swirling with an indistinct feeling of discomfort. The apartment lay in stillness, interrupted only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the muted echoes of the city beyond. I placed the bags on the kitchen counter, the thud of canned goods striking the marble resonating throughout the area. As I started to unpack, a subtle sound drew my focus, a rhythmic, nearly melodic noise emanating from down the hall. It wasn't deafening, yet it held a steady presence, a soft hum of voices intertwined with an elusive element I couldn't fully identify. I halted, a box of pasta clutched in my hand, and tuned into the sounds around me. The noise emanated from Daniel's room. My stepson was at home, which was typical, but the sound he was making was quite disturbing. A sense of curiosity tugged at me, intertwining with an escalating feeling of unease. What was happening in there? I entered the hallway, the sound of my heels softly echoing against the hardwood floor. The sound became more distinct as I neared Daniel's door, breaths, low and urgent, interspersed with soft moans. My heart started to race, my palms slick with sweat. I knew I shouldn't go in, yet an inexplicable pull urged me onward. I extended my hand toward the doorknob, pausing briefly before gradually twisting it. The door slowly swung open, and I stood still, my breath hitching in my throat. The room was softly illuminated, the curtains closed, creating a gentle golden ambience that enveloped the surroundings. Daniel and Mia lay on the bed, intertwined, their bodies swaying in a rhythm that felt profoundly intimate. The atmosphere was heavy with the aroma of their desire, rich and earthy, laced with a touch of sweetness, reminiscent of vanilla. Daniel's gaze shot wide, fixing intently on me. For a brief instant, it felt as though time had come to a halt. His expression transformed from joy to disbelief, his lips parting as if to utter something, yet silence enveloped him. Mia released a soft gasp, her cheeks turning a deep shade of crimson as she clutched the blanket and wrapped it around herself. "Oh my God," I stammered, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "I sincerely apologize. That was not my intention." I couldn't complete the sentence, it just wouldn't come out. Heat flooded my cheeks as I retreated, forcefully closing the door behind me. My heart raced within me, each thump resonating in my ears as I made my way to the kitchen. I rested against the counter, my hands shaking as I struggled to comprehend what I had just witnessed. Daniel, my stepson, and Mia, his girlfriend, are together. Just like that. The image lingered in my thoughts, striking and unforgettable. A wave of guilt washed over me, realizing I had crossed a boundary. Yet there lingered an unnameable feeling, something deeper beneath the surface. A peculiar, intrusive warmth coursed through me, causing my skin to prickle. I reached for a glass in the cabinet and filled it with water, downing it quickly in a bid to soothe my pounding heart. What am I meant to do now? Act as if it never occurred? Confront it directly? The mere idea of discussing it with Daniel sent a wave of unease through me. I occupied myself with unpacking the groceries, attempting to push the incident out of my mind. Yet it lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. The echoes, the fragrances, the expression on Daniel's face, they lingered in my thoughts, cycling endlessly through my mind. As I placed the final can of soup in the pantry, I caught the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. My breath caught in my throat, and I stood still, preparing for the impending clash. However, the footsteps moved on, making their way to the bathroom, and I exhaled a trembling sigh of relief. At this moment, all I could do was bide my time, and wish that the warmth in my cheeks would diminish before our paths crossed once more. I stood at the stove, stirring the pot of pasta sauce absent-mindedly, my thoughts still tangled in the awkwardness of the afternoon. The apartment was filled with the rich scent of garlic and tomatoes. A familiar fragrance that did little to alleviate the tightness in my chest. The creak of a door swinging open down the hall caused my hand to halt abruptly in the midst of stirring. Daniel and Mia emerged from his room. I inhaled deeply, compelling myself to concentrate on the meal before me. The final thing I required was to ruin dinner on top of all the other chaos. I heard them coming into the kitchen, their quiet whispers almost lost in the sizzling of the sauce. "Hey," Daniel said, his voice uncertain as he entered the kitchen. I pivoted, compelling a grin to spread across my features. "Hey, the meal is nearly prepared." He nodded, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his jeans. Mia stood behind him, arms crossed over her chest. Her face still flushed from earlier. She gave me a small, awkward smile, and I replied with what I hoped was a reassuring nod. "It smells good," Mia said, her voice gentle. "Thank you," I responded, shifting my focus back to the stove. "It's simply pasta, nothing extravagant." The stillness lingered around us, thick and oppressive. I occupied myself with serving the food, hoping that the act of moving would alleviate some of the tension. As I glanced over my shoulder, I noticed Daniel and Mia already settled at the table, their gazes averted, fingers restless in their laps. I placed the plates on the table and settled into my chair, which let out a loud scrape against the floor. The soft clatter of utensils resonated throughout the room. As we commenced our meal, the silence hanging heavily in the air. I looked up at Daniel, who was prodding his food with his fork. His jaw clenched. Mia sat next to him, her shoulders drawn in, her eyes glued to her plate. The noise of a fork dragging across porcelain sent a shiver down my spine. I cleared my throat, seeking something, anything to express. "So, how was your day?" I inquired, my tone raised in the stillness of the room. Daniel glanced upward, astonishment dancing in his expression. "Well, okay. How about yours?" "Occupied," I responded, savoring a sip of wine. "The workload has been quite overwhelming." He nodded, and a hush fell over the room, re-established its presence over us once more. I took another sip of wine, the cool liquid offering little solace to my frayed nerves. After what seemed like a lifetime, Daniel finally cleared his throat. "Have you heard about the storm that's being forecasted for the... What are your plans for the weekend?" I blinked, taken aback by the abrupt change in subject. "Ah, yes. I came across some information regarding that." He reclined in his chair, a subtle smirk dancing on his lips. "Looks like we're all going to be indoors for a while. So it's time to gather some tasty treats." Mia released a gentle laugh, her shoulders easing just a bit. "Or tabletop games. Do you recall that occasion when we attempted to play Monopoly?" Daniel sighed, his eyes drifting upward in exasperation. "Please, no reminders. I still owe you a fortune." I let out a soft laugh, the atmosphere in the room finally starting to lighten. Monopoly is a perilous game. I've witnessed friendships dissolve because of it. Daniel smiled, his typical assurance coming back. "Indeed, Mia possesses a fierce determination. I have a strong suspicion that she might actually be an accountant on the down low." Mia grinned, playfully nudging him with her elbow. "Someone has to hold you accountable." We shared a laugh, its tone bright and sincere, and for a brief moment, the discomfort of the afternoon appeared to dissolve. As the meal continued, the conversation began to unfold more effortlessly. We discussed our jobs, the most recent news, and a film we had all watched lately. It was a sensation, standard. Nearly. As I topped off my wineglass, the recollection of what I had stumbled upon earlier began to resurface in my thoughts. Their bodies intertwined, the expression on Daniel's face as he caught sight of me. It was unforgettable. I caught sight of them, their heads huddled closely as they exchanged whispers, and a peculiar blend of curiosity and unease began to churn within me. The wine had relaxed my inhibitions, And before I could catch myself, I leaned in, my voice a hushed yet resolute whisper. There are certain areas where both of you could enhance your skills. The words lingered in the atmosphere, dense and electrifying. Daniel and Mia stood still, their eyes growing wide as they turned to face me. The room was enveloped in silence, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator breaking the stillness. What do you mean? Daniel inquired, his tone measured. I paused, understanding far too late that I had overstepped a boundary. Yet, there was no way to retreat at this point. I expressed myself with great care in selecting my words. If you're going to undertake it, you may as well execute it properly. Mia's face turned crimson, while Daniel fixed his gaze on me, his expression a complete mystery. For a moment, I believed I had shattered everything, the delicate tranquility we had just discovered. But then he laughed softly, shaking his head. Wow, Emma, he said with a smirk, I had no idea you were such an expert. I arched an eyebrow, attempting to mask my unease. I've experienced quite a bit in my time. Mia chuckled, her blush dissipating. Perhaps you could share some insights with us. The remark took me by surprise and I chuckled. The atmosphere in the room lightening once more. As the discussion turned to more cheerful subjects, I couldn't help but sense that something had shifted. A boundary had been crossed. An uncertainty loomed over its implications for me. Them or for me. The subsequent days unfolded with unusual. A palpable, unvoiced tension hung in the atmosphere, reminiscent of the stillness that precedes a tempest. Daniel and Mia steered clear of mentioning that dinner conversation, and I followed suit. Yet it was present, hidden just below the surface of each encounter. Daniel would steal glances at me when he believed I was unaware, his face revealing a blend of curiosity and an elusive emotion I couldn't fully identify. Mia would flush with color whenever our gazes intertwined, her eyes flickering away swiftly. The atmosphere surrounding us was thick with anticipation, crackling with energy, as though we were all poised for an impending moment, everything to occur. I urged myself to release it. It wasn't my role to interfere in their relationship, regardless of how much that dinner conversation had unlocked their connection. Yet, the recollection of what I had witnessed, what I had expressed, continued to echo in my thoughts. And then, there existed the book. I discovered it tucked away in the back of my closet, hidden beneath a heap of forgotten items. Photographs, collections, and cherished trinkets. It was a book focused on the art of intimacy. One I had purchased years back during a time when I was seeking to add some excitement to my own relationship. I had never truly delved into it, yet the title itself appeared quite intriguing. One afternoon, while Daniel and Mia were out, I placed the book on the coffee table, its cover turned down to keep it from attracting too much notice. I reassured myself that it was merely a suggestion, a soft push towards the right path, yet beneath the surface, I understood it was deeper than that. That evening, I found myself in the kitchen, diligently chopping vegetables for dinner, when Daniel strolled in, the book clutched in his hand. My heart raced, yet I compelled myself to maintain my concentration on the cutting board. Is that you, Emma? He spoke, his tone wavering. I glanced upward, pretending to be taken aback. Hey Daniel, how's it going? He raised the book, his face a mask of mystery. Is this yours? I took a deep breath, striving to maintain a calm tone. Oh, I stumbled upon it while tidying up my closet. I thought it could be assisting. He lifted an eyebrow, a hint of a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Useful, isn't it? I shrugged, returning my attention to the vegetables. I thought you might find this intriguing. He paused. A moment of silence enveloping us, and I sensed his gaze fixed upon me. He moved in closer, resting against the counter. Did you get a chance to read it? I shook my head. My eyes locked onto the cutting board. No, as I mentioned, I just discovered it. He softly hummed, turning the pages with a gentle flick. It is thorough. I let out a soft laugh, attempting to ease the atmosphere. Indeed, that is the crux of the matter, isn't it? He fell silent once more, and I sensed the tension escalating between us. He then cleared his throat. Mia and I engaged in conversation. And we considered, perhaps, we would appreciate any guidance you can offer. My stomach plummeted as I turned to confront him. The knife still gripped tightly in my hand. Any suggestions? He nodded, his expression now one of gravity. As you mentioned during dinner, if you're willing to give it a go. I gazed at him, my thoughts swirling rapidly. This was far from what I had anticipated, not in the slightest. However, the concept captivated me, igniting a curiosity I found impossible to overlook. Are you really serious? I inquired, attempting to assess his response. He shrugged, a smirk creeping back onto his face. Why not indeed? You have the experience, correct? I paused, my heart racing in my chest. This was a boundary I never imagined I would breach, yet the idea of declining felt incorrect. Is that all right? I finally spoke, my voice unwavering even as the nerves twisted in my stomach. I'm here to assist you. The atmosphere between us transformed, evolving into something more profound, more electric. Daniel's smirk grew broader as he nodded, his gaze fixed intently on me. Excellent, he remarked, his tone subdued. We will inform you when we are prepared. He pivoted and exited the kitchen, the book remaining clutched in his hand. I stood there, my heart pounding, the knife firmly gripped in my hand. What had I just committed to? The initial session was clumsy. I sat in the corner of Daniel's room, perched on a chair I had brought in from the kitchen, striving to appear as composed as possible. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn to block out the evening sun, and the air felt thick with anticipation. Daniel and Mia lay on the bed, their bodies almost touching, eyes darting nervously in my direction. Understood. I spoke, my voice unwavering even as a flicker of discomfort stirred within me. Let's begin with the fundamentals. They nodded, their faces reflecting a blend of shame and resolve. I inhaled deeply, reminding myself to remain objective and uninvolved. This wasn't about me, it was about offering them support. Effective communication is essential, I started. Maintaining a professional tone. Communicate with one another, sharing what brings pleasure and what does not. Daniel and Mia shared a look, then nodded once more, their gestures rigid. All right. Daniel replied, his tone a bit hesitant. We are capable of achieving that. Mia offered him a faint smile, her fingers gliding softly over his. Indeed. Let us give it a shot. The atmosphere in the room was thick with anticipation as they started to remove their clothing. Daniel removed his shirt, exposing his toned, athletic physique, with a subtle sheen of sweat beginning to shimmer on his skin. Mia trailed behind, her hands quivering ever so slightly as she unfastened her blouse. I briefly turned my eyes away, experiencing an unusual blend of unease and intrigue. They were open, laid bare, and yet there was a subtle assurance in the manner of their movements. Mia's bra slipped from her shoulders, cascading to the floor and unveiling her soft, delicate curves, while Daniel's jeans lay abandoned, leaving him clad only in his boxers. The atmosphere became increasingly heated, the air heavy with the fragrance of their longing. I cleared my throat, striving to keep my composure intact. Proceed gently, I directed, my tone now more tender. Handle her with care, Daniel. Take your time. He nodded, his gaze fixed on Mia's as he extended his hand to cradle her face, his thumb gently gliding over her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her breath catching as he moved closer to kiss her. Their movements started off cautious, almost tentative, but as they heeded my guidance, they began to unwind, their bodies synchronizing in a rhythm that was both hesitant and beautiful. Good, I said, my voice unwavering even as the warmth flushed my cheeks. Now, Mia, lead him. Reveal to him what captivates you. She nodded, her hands gliding down his chest as she leaned into. Murmur something into his ear. Daniel's gaze deepened. His hands finding their way to her waist as he attuned himself to her signals. The session progressed, the atmosphere becoming increasingly warm and intimate with every fleeting moment. I provided insights when necessary, highlighting subtleties and motivating them to delve into fresh dynamics. At one point, I suggested, gesturing toward Daniel, try this. Engage your hands more. Connect with her in this way. He adhered to my guidance, his movements becoming increasingly assured as he navigated Mia's form. She inhaled sharply, her spine curving as his touch connected with her in a manner that unmistakably stirred something deep within her. That's it, I whispered, my tone soft and supportive. Just like that. As time passed, the sessions increased in frequency, and Daniel and Mia became increasingly at ease with my presence. The atmosphere in the room grew more intense, the bond among them, and by extension, myself, strengthening with every fleeting second. One evening, following a notably intense session, a change occurred. Daniel pulled back from Mia, his breath labored, his skin shimmering with perspiration. He glanced my way, his gaze shadowed by an emotion I couldn't fully identify. Emma, he murmured, his voice deep and gravelly. I stood still, my heart racing in my chest. Indeed. He moved nearer, his aura commanding attention. Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me, his lips warm and demanding. The world appeared to freeze, while my thoughts and emotions swirled chaotically within me. I ought to have distanced themselves. I ought to have intervened. However, I did not. As I contemplated the Mia shifted nearer, her the dual experience. Daniel's firm demand. Between us, merging until they as I gazed at them. An intricate dance of turmoil and longing. Is that you, Emma? Mia whispered, her I remained silent, struggling to the I was completely in the dark about what this meant for them. For me, but one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same. Identical. To Daniel's hands found their way to my waist, drawing me nearer. His touch a perfect blend of firmness and gentleness. His lips were urgent, compelling, and I felt myself reacting naturally, my hands clutching his shoulders for stability. Mia was already close, her presence unmistakable. Her silence spoke volumes, her gaze piercing and unwavering, breath catching in her throat as she observed us. From the periphery of my vision, I noticed her subtly adjusting her stance, moving her weight from one foot to the other, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. Is that you, Emma? Daniel whispered softly against my lips, his voice deep and sultry. I drew back a bit, my thoughts swirling rapidly. Daniel, we ought not to. He quieted me with another kiss, his hands gliding down to my hips. Absolutely. We ought to. A wave of guilt washed over me, but it was swiftly overshadowed by an overwhelming desire flowing within me. My body reacted uncontrollably, my heart racing in my chest. Before I could voice any more objections, I sensed Mia's hand on my arm, her touch both warm and hesitant. Emma, she murmured gently, her voice quivering with doubt. It's all right. I glanced at her, my breath momentarily halting in my throat. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that made my heart ache. Her fingers brushed against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. Are you certain? I inquired, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. She nodded, her cheeks tinged with a rosy hue. I desire this. Daniel's arms wrapped around me, his breath soft and warm against my ear. We both do. The space seemed unbearably confined, the atmosphere heavy with expectation. My thoughts were shouting for me to halt, to turn back, yet my body had its own plans. With a sense of trepidation, I let them lead me to the bed, my heart pounding with each cautious step. Mia settled on the edge of the bed, her hands extending to draw me closer to her. As I sat beside her, Daniel knelt in front of me, his hands gently cradling my face as he kissed me once more. His lips warm and fervent. In that moment, Mia leaned closer, her lips grazing my neck, her breath warm against my skin. The experience was intense. My thoughts swirling as I attempted to make sense of it all. Daniel's hands moved with assurance, his touch assertive and self-assured, while Mia's were gentle and curious. "Is that you, Emma?" Mia murmured softly against my skin, her voice quivering with emotion. "Is this acceptable?" I nodded, my breath catching in my throat. "Absolutely." The atmosphere in the room buzzed with energy. Each caress, each inhalation, each hushed utterance resonating in the soft glow. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance, yet my body remained acutely aware. Reacting to the palpable heat between us in ways beyond my control. Daniel's hands roamed freely, his touch a blend of the known and the unknown. He kissed me with an insatiable desire that rendered me breathless, his lips gliding down my neck, my collarbone, every inch of my skin alive with his touch. His fingers glided along the contour of my waist, exploring the gentle curve of my hip, each movement intentional and assured. I sensed the power in his hands. The way he embraced me, as if he would never release his hold. Mia stood next to me, her presence weaving an intricate tapestry of complexity into the moment. Her touch was gentle. More hesitant yet equally thrilling. She pressed her lips to my shoulder, warmth radiating against my skin, her fingers weaving through mine. Her gaze held a quiet intensity. A vulnerability that tugged at my heart. "Emma," she murmured once more, her voice quivering. "Are you certain?" I nodded, my throat constricted. "Absolutely, I have no doubt." Her smile was gentle. Nearly bashful, as she leaned in to kiss me once more, her lips grazing mine in a manner that felt both pure and profoundly personal. Daniel's hands continued their dance. His touch igniting waves of pleasure within me, and the blend of sensations was utterly intoxicating. The atmosphere was alive with the echoes of our desire, the uneven breaths. The gentle whisper of fabric, punctuated by the rare gasp or sigh. The atmosphere was heavy with the fragrance of perspiration and desire, the tension between us nearly overwhelming. I shut my eyes, yielding to the experience. My hesitations, my remorse, my apprehension. Everything else blurred away, revealing just the pure, unrefined bond we shared. I recognized that this was incorrect. Yet, at that instant, it seemed just as it should be. Daniel's hands glided to the buttons of my blouse, his fingers quivering just a bit as he unfastened them, one after another. I felt bare. Open to the world, yet oddly free. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, there was an intensity in his gaze that caused my heart to flutter, a blend of intrigue, longing, and an unnameable depth that stirred something within me. Mia's hands intertwined with his, her touch soft and comforting. She leaned in to kiss my shoulder, her lips warm against my skin. Her breath a steady warmth that enveloped me. "You're stunning," she murmured, her tone gentle yet brimming with genuine emotion. A lump formed in my throat. My cheeks aflame with a blend of embarrassment and pleasure. "So are you," I responded, my voice trembling. Daniel's lips glided down my neck. His hands roaming my body with a boldness that was equally exhilarating and daunting. Simultaneously, Mia's fingers danced across my skin, her touch delicate yet charged with energy. The feeling was intense, my thoughts swirling as I attempted to make sense of it all. I felt as though I was perched on the brink of a great chasm, balancing precariously between trepidation and thrill. "Emma," Daniel whispered softly against my skin, his voice deep and sultry. "Release it." I paused for a brief moment, my thoughts swirling rapidly. With a deep breath, I closed my eyes and surrendered. The bond we shared was unmistakable, the energy among the three of us charged with intensity. We were like three puzzle pieces, each one lacking something on its own but forming a perfect picture when united. As the evening unfolded, the barriers between us faded, the distinctions merging until we were no longer distinct beings but a woven, close-knit trio. The atmosphere crackled with intensity, the fervor shared between us nearly overwhelming. As it came to an end, we found ourselves intertwined, our breaths gradually settling into a steady rhythm. The room lay in silence, the atmosphere thick with the gravity of recent events. I glanced over at Daniel and Mia, their faces aglow, and their eyes sparkling with an indescribable emotion. "Emma," Mia whispered gently, her hand lightly placed on my arm. "Are you all right?" I nodded, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Absolutely. Are you?" She smiled, her expression gentle and warm. "Better than just okay." Daniel extended his hand, his fingers grazing my cheek. This alters the entire landscape, doesn't it?" I paused, my thoughts swirling. Indeed, I finally expressed my thoughts, yet I do not look back with remorse. They didn't either, and in that instant, that was everything that counted. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, creating a warm, golden hue that enveloped the room. Culinary space. I stood at the counter, my hands cradling a steaming mug of coffee, the scent anchors me in the present. My thoughts were still swirling from the occurrences of the night before, the recollection of their touch, their warmth, their desire, remaining like a vibrant dream I couldn't get rid of. The sound of footsteps drew my attention, my heart racing as Daniel stepped into the room. His hair was tousled, his shirt rumpled, and there was a softness in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. He offered me a slight, hesitant smile as he reached for a mug in the cabinet and began to pour. He prepared a cup of coffee for himself. "Morning," he murmured, his voice gravelly and thick with the remnants of sleep. "Good morning," I responded, my voice unwavering even though a nervous flutter danced in my chest. Mia arrived shortly after, her hair gathered into a relaxed braid, her complexion untouched by makeup. She gazed radiant, her cheeks flushed with a vibrant glow, and her eyes sparkling with a blend of anticipation and doubt. "Good morning," she murmured gently, her eyes darting between Daniel and me. "Morning," we both echoed, the word lingering in the air like a whispered promise. The three of us gathered in the kitchen, the quiet lingering in the space between us. It wasn't uncomfortable per se, but there was a palpable tension, an unarticulated matter that required attention. Mia was the first to break the silence. "So last night unfolded," she remarked, her tone quivering just a bit. I cast a quick look her way, my fingers tightening around the mug in my hand. "It certainly did." Daniel rested against the counter, his gaze fixed upon me. "What are your thoughts on it?" I paused, my thoughts swirling as I sought the perfect expression. What were my emotions? Guilty, exhilarated, confused, alive. It was a tempest of feelings I couldn't quite unravel. I finally admitted, "It's complicated, but I have no regrets." Mia released a sharp breath, as though she had been holding it in. "Neither do I," she stated, her voice resolute, even with the flush rising to her cheeks. Daniel nodded, his expression contemplative. "Not me either." The silence returned, yet this time it felt distinct, less charged, more reflective. I savored a sip of my coffee, the warm liquid calming my frayed nerves. "What comes next?" Mia inquired, her tone uncertain. I gazed at her, then shifted my attention to Daniel, my thoughts swirling with intensity. What comes next, truly? This was a journey into the unknown. A road I had never envisioned traversing. Yet, as I gazed upon them, at the bond we shared, I realized I couldn't simply turn my back.